She sat in the execution chair, the heavy leather straps digging into her wrists. Zenia Hart, a 47-year-old Omega who had spent her life invisible, was now the center of the Wolf Council's fury. The lethal injection meant to stop her heart was loaded. The Alpha who framed her a man she once loved watched with a cold smirk. But just as the executioner stepped forward, the courtroom doors didn't just open, they exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear stepped through the smoke. The Alpha commanded them to kneel. Instead, the leader of the intruders looked past the guards, locked eyes with the woman in the chair, and whispered one word that silenced the room. Mom. The rain in Coldwater Ridge didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime stick harder. It was November 14th, 1998. Zenia Hart was 22 years old, and she was currently kneeling in the mud outside the sprawling estate of the Lowen pack. Her knees were soaked through her cheap denim jeans, and her hair plastered to her skull. But the physical cold was nothing compared to the hollow ache in her chest. The front door of the estate opened. Warm golden light spilled out, illuminating the silhouette of Garrick Lowen. He was the future Alpha, the man Zenia had believed was her fated mate since they were teenagers. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand, looking down at her like she was a stray dog that had wandered too close to the porch. "Go home, Zenia," Garrick said, his voice devoid of the warmth it used to hold. "You promised." Zenia's voice broke. She didn't shout. Omegas in the Coldwater pack were trained never to raise their voices. "You said when you turned 25. I said a lot of things when we were kids," Garrick interrupted, stepping out onto the covered porch. He didn't offer her shelter. "But I'm taking over the pack next month. The elders have been clear. I need a Luna with bloodlines, with strength. Not this." He gestured vaguely at her shivering form. "You're an Omega Zenia. You work in the kitchens. You scrub the floors. You don't sit on the throne." "I'm your mate," she whispered, the ancient wolf instinct in her chest clawing at her ribs. "Not anymore." Garrick took a sip of his drink. "I've chosen Lydia. The mating ceremony is next week. If you ever come to this house again without a direct order to clean something, I'll have you exiled. Now run along." He turned his back and slammed the heavy oak door. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot in the silent woods. Zenia didn't scream. She didn't howl. She simply stood up, her legs trembling, and turned toward the darkness of the tree line. The rejection bond snapped in her chest, a physical pain like a rib cracking. But she swallowed the bile and walked. She walked past the pack boundaries, past the safe zones, deep into the rogue territory, near the old abandoned textile mill. She wanted the cold to numb her. She wanted the rogue wolves to find her and end it. But fate, it seemed, had a crueler sense of humor. Near the overflowing banks of the river, beneath the twisted roots of a dying oak tree, Zenia heard a sound. It wasn't the growl of a predator. It was a whimper. High-pitched, desperate, and wet. She pushed through the brambles, ignoring the thorns tearing at her hands. There, half submerged in the mud, was a soggy cardboard box. The flap was open. Inside, huddled together in a shivering pile of wet fur and skin, were 3 toddlers. They were shifting uncontrollably, a sign of immense stress and trauma. One second they were human boys no older than 4, and the next they were tiny, trembling wolf pups. This was a death sentence. In the werewolf world, uncontrolled shifting in children was often seen as a sign of being feral or cursed. Most packs drowned pups like this. Zenia stared at them. They were dirty, starving, and clearly left to die in the storm. The one in the middle, a boy with messy dark hair, looked up. His eyes were a piercing, unusual violet, a color that would have gotten him killed instantly by superstitious elders. He didn't growl. He reached out a muddy, half-transformed claw toward her. Zenia looked back toward the packlands where Garrick was likely toasting to his new life with Lydia. She looked at the river that threatened to swallow the box. "Okay," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Okay." She took off her heavy woolen coat, the only thing keeping her from hypothermia, and wrapped the 3 boys in it. She lifted the bundle, grunting under the weight. They were heavy, dense with muscle, even at this age. "I'm nobody," she told the bundle as she trudged back toward her tiny, dilapidated shack on the edge of town. "But I guess you're nobodies, too. We can be nobodies together." She named them that night as she dried them off with her only clean towel. The one with the violet eyes, the protector who growled at the thunder she named Cade. The one who was silent, watching her with calculating green eyes, she named Roman. The smallest one who clung to her neck and refused to let go, she named Declan. She didn't know it then, but she hadn't just picked up 3 stray children. She had just adopted the heirs of a fallen dynasty, hunted by every alpha in the state. And by saving them, she had just placed a target on her back that would take 25 years to detonate. Raising 3 growing werewolf boys on a waitress's salary was impossible. Raising 3 unregistered werewolf boys who showed signs of alpha blood was suicide. For the next 10 years, Zenia Hart lived a double life that would have broken a weaker woman. By day, she was the invisible Omega at Jerry's diner, pouring coffee for the very wolves who looked down on her. She endured the snide comments from Lydia, who would come in flashing her diamond ring, making sure to spill sugar on the table just to watch Zenia wipe it up. Zenia took the abuse. She took the minimum wage. She took the leftover scraps of meat from the kitchen, not for herself, but for the insatiable hunger waiting at home. By night, she was a drill sergeant and a mother. Her shack was small, a 2-room cabin with drafty windows. To hide the boys, she dug out a cellar beneath the floorboards, reinforcing it with soundproofing she stole from construction sites. "Listen to me," she would tell them sitting on the dirt floor as Cade, Roman, and Declan ate boiled chicken with ferocious speed. "If anyone knocks, you go under. You don't make a sound. If I scream, you don't come out. Do you understand? We can fight them," Cade said one evening. He was 10 now, but he looked 14. His shoulders were broad, and his violet eyes flashed with an aggression that terrified Zenia. "I can rip them apart, Mom. I'm strong." "Strength isn't just about teeth, Cade," Zenia said sternly, wiping grease off Declan's face. "Strength is staying alive. If Garrick or his enforcers find you, they won't just kill you. They'll kill me." That silenced them. They loved her with a ferocity that bordered on worship. To them, she wasn't a rejected Omega. She was the goddess herself. As they hit puberty, the danger escalated. The boys weren't just strong. They were abnormally powerful. One afternoon, while Zenia was at work, a rogue bear wandered near the cabin. Usually a bear could tear a wolf apart. When Zenia came home, she found the front door hanging off its hinges. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her heart. She dropped her bag of groceries and ran inside. She found the boys in the living room. The bear was dead on the rug. It hadn't been mauled. Its neck had been snapped cleanly. Cade was sitting on the sofa nursing a bruised rib. Roman was reading a book, unbothered. Declan was pacing. He tried to get in, Cade said simply. We handled it. Zenia stared at the massive carcass. 3 12-year-olds had taken down a grizzly bear without suffering a scratch. This wasn't normal pack genetics. This was something ancient. We have to bury it, Roman said, his voice calm. He was the strategist. Deep. If the pack patrols smell bear blood mixed with ours, they'll investigate. They spent the night digging 6 feet down in the hard earth. As they worked, Zenia watched them. They moved with a synchronization that soldiers trained years to achieve. They didn't need to speak to coordinate their movements. She realized then that she couldn't keep them hidden much longer. Coldwater Ridge was too small. Garrick Lowen's paranoia was growing as his own pack faced financial troubles. He was tightening the patrols. The breaking point came 3 years later. Zenia was working a double shift. Garrick Lowen walked in, accompanied by his teenage son, Bax. Bax was everything Garrick wanted. Cruel, entitled, and spoiled. But he was weak. Zenia was refilling their coffees when Bax, trying to impress his father, stuck out his foot. Zenia tripped. The pot of hot coffee shattered on the floor, scalding her leg. Clumsy bitch, Bax sneered. Garrick laughed. Clean it up, Zenia, and pay for the pot. Zenia was on her knees, picking up shards of glass through her tears when the diner door opened. The bell didn't just jingle. It rattled. Cade stood there. He was 15, now 6'2", wearing a hoodie that obscured his face. He had sensed her distress. The pack bond she shared with the boys was stronger than any blood tie. The air in the diner grew heavy. Static electricity crackled. "Get out!" Zenia whispered, her eyes widening in terror. If Garrick saw Cade's eyes, if he sensed the alpha aura rolling off the boy. Cade took a step toward Bax. A low growl vibrating at a frequency that made the silverware on the tables shake emanated from his chest. Garrick stopped laughing. He stood up, his alpha instincts flaring. "Who is that?" Garrick demanded, squinting. "A stray." "I said, get out!" Zenia screamed, not at Garrick, but at Cade. She stood up, ignoring the burns on her leg, and shoved Cade towards the door. "Get out right now, or I will never forgive you." Cade hesitated. He looked at Bax, visualizing 20 different ways to end him, then looked at Zenia's terrified face. He turned and vanished into the night. "Who was that?" Garrick asked, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "He smelled powerful, and he smelled like you. Just a homeless kid I gave a burger to once." Zenia lied, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "He's mentally ill. I'll make sure he doesn't come back." Garrick stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. "See that you do. If I see a stray that size again, I'll mount his head on my wall." That night, Zenia made the hardest decision of her life. She went home and packed 3 bags. She took all the money she had saved for 15 years, a pitiful stack of crumpled bills hidden in a coffee can. "You have to go," she told them. "No," Declan cried, clinging to her arm. He was the most emotional of the 3. "We won't leave you. You almost exposed us today," Zenia said, her voice trembling. "Garrick is suspicious. If he finds you, he kills you. You are alphas, I know that now. You are too big for this cage." She handed Cade the money. Then she took a silver locket from her neck, the only heirloom her mother had left her. She had broken it into 3 distinct, jagged pieces. "Take these," she said, pressing a piece into each of their hands. "Go to the city. Find the Iron Guild. I heard they take in wolves without packs. Train. Become strong. But do not come back here until you are untouchable. We will come back for you, Cade vowed, his violet eyes burning with tears. I swear it on the moon. Just live, Zenia sobbed, kissing their foreheads. Just live. They left under the cover of a moonless night. Zenia watched them disappear into the woods, and for the second time in her life, her heart shattered. She was truly alone now, and she had no idea that Garrick Lowen wasn't done with her yet. For 12 years after the boys left, Zenia's heart existed in a vacuum of silence. She didn't move from Coldwater Ridge. She couldn't. Garrick Lowen, now the Alpha, had instated a debt law in the territory. He claimed that Zenia's father, who had died years prior, owed the pack significant funds. It was a lie, a fabricated ledger meant to keep his rejected mate under his boot. If she tried to leave the territory, she would be hunted as a fugitive. So she worked. She aged. The stress etched fine lines around her eyes and silver into her hair. She was 47 now, her hands calloused from decades of scrubbing floors and washing dishes. She had heard nothing from Cade Roman or Declan. No letters, no calls. At first she cried every night. Eventually she found comfort in the silence. Silence meant they weren't captured. Silence meant they were alive somewhere far away from the cruelty of Coldwater. But Coldwater Ridge was rotting from the inside out. Under Garrick's leadership, the pack had made bad investments. They lost their timber contracts. The pack funds were drained by Lydia's lavish lifestyle and the gambling debts of their son, Bax. Bax Lowen was now 27, a man-child with too much power and zero discipline. He was the scourge of the town, crashing cars, harassing women, and starting fights he couldn't finish. The pack elders were growing restless. They whispered of a vote of no confidence. Garrick needed a distraction. He needed a tragedy to unite the pack behind him. He decided to sacrifice his own failure of a son to save his throne, and he knew exactly who to pin it on. It was the night of the autumn equinox banquet. Zenia had been conscripted to serve the head table. The mood was tense. Bax was drunk, loudly complaining about the wine, while the elders watched with disdain. "More wine, Omega!" Bax shouted, snapping his fingers at Zenia. Zenia approached, head bowed, holding a carafe of red wine. As she poured, Bax accidentally elbowed her. The wine spilled onto his white dress shirt. "You stupid and hag!" Bax roared, shoving her hard. Zenia fell back, hitting her hip against a serving cart. The room went silent. "I'm sorry, Alpha Bax," she murmured, struggling to stand. "Get out of my sight!" Garrick growled from the head of the table, his eyes cold and calculating. "Go back to the kitchen." Zenia limped away. 20 minutes later, chaos erupted. Bax Lowen stood up to make a toast, clutched his throat, turned a violent shade of purple, and collapsed onto the table, shattering the china. He convulsed for 30 seconds, and then went still. Foam tinged with blue leaked from his lips. "He's been poisoned," Lydia shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at the kitchen doors. "It was her. The Omega. I saw her tampering with his goblet. It was a lie so blatant it was almost laughable, but in a room full of wolves looking for a scapegoat, truth didn't matter." Garrick's enforcers stormed the kitchen. They found Zenia washing dishes. Before she could turn off the tap, they tackled her. Her head slammed against the stainless steel counter, stars bursting in her vision. Zenia Hart, the lead enforcer, barked, zip-tying her wrists behind her back until the circulation cut off. "You are under arrest for the assassination of the Alpha Heir and high treason against the Lowen pack. They dragged her out through the back door. As they shoved her into the back of a black SUV, Zenia saw Garrick standing on the loading dock. He wasn't grieving. He was checking his watch. He met her eyes and mouthed one word. Finally. She realized then that this had been the plan all along. He couldn't kill her because of the mating bond. It was taboo to kill a fated mate directly. But if the law killed her, if she was executed for treason, that was a loophole. He would be free of the rejected mate shame, and he would be the grieving father who rallied his pack against a murderous traitor. Zenia didn't fight. She closed her eyes and thought of 3 little boys with violet, green, and brown eyes. I hope you're safe, she thought. I'm sorry I won't be there to see who you became. The trial was held 2 weeks later in the Great Hall of the Regional Wolf Council. It was less of a trial and more of a theatre production. The prosecutor was a slimy man named Vic, known for burying evidence. The jury consisted of 12 wolves from allied packs who owed Garrick money. Zenia sat in a cage in the center of the room. She wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her thinning frame. She had been denied a lawyer. She had been denied visitors. The evidence is irrefutable, Vic announced, pacing before the council. We found wolfsbane powder in the defendant's locker at the diner. We have witness testimony from Luna Lydia, stating she saw the defendant hovering over the prince's drink. Objection, Zenia whispered hoarsely. I don't have a locker. I keep my purse under the sink. Silence. Magistrate Cohen banged his gavel. He was a corrupt official who had been bribed with timberland rights. The defendant will speak only when spoken to. Garrick took the stand. He wore all black, playing the role of the devastated father to perfection. He even squeezed out a tear. I tried to show her mercy, Garrick said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. I rejected her because we weren't compatible, but I let her stay. I gave her a job. I gave her a home. And how does she repay me by murdering my son out of jealousy? She wanted to destroy my bloodline because she couldn't be part of it. The crowd murmured in anger. Monster, someone hissed. Kill the Omega. Zenia sat numbly. She looked at the faces in the crowd. People she had served coffee to for 20 years. People whose children she had smiled at. They looked at her with pure hatred. The narrative was too strong. She was the bitter, barren reject who killed the golden sun. Zenia Hart, Magistrate Cohen said, looking down his nose at her. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Zenia stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she gripped the bars of the cage. I didn't do it, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I loved this pack. I served this pack even when you treated me like dirt. Garrick knows I didn't do it. He killed his own son. Gasps filled the room. Garrick stood up, his face red. She lies. Even in the face of death, she spews poison. We have heard enough, Magistrate Cohen declared. He didn't even consult the jury. The tribunal finds the defendant Zenia Hart guilty of first-degree murder and treason. He paused for dramatic effect. The sentence is death. Zenia felt the floor drop out from under her, though she was standing still. The execution will be carried out immediately, Cohen continued. We must cleanse this stain from our community. 2 guards opened the cage. They dragged Zenia toward the back of the hall where the execution chamber waited. It was a glass-walled room, designed for humane disposal. A chair equipped with restraints and an IV drip for the silver nitrate solution. As they strapped her into the chair, Zenia looked through the glass. She saw Garrick smiling. It was a small, tight smile of victory. The executioner, a man in a surgical mask, inserted the needle into her arm. He checked the bag of clear fluid. "Any final words?" the executioner asked mechanically. Zenia looked up at the ceiling. "I wish I could have said goodbye to them," she whispered. "To who?" The executioner frowned. "My boys." The magistrate raised his hand to signal the start of the drip. "Proceed." The executioner reached for the valve. Boom! The entire building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What was that?" Garrick shouted, looking around. Boom! The massive double doors at the entrance of the great hall didn't just open. They were blown off their hinges. A thick cloud of smoke rolled into the courtroom, followed by the blinding red dots of laser sights. A voice amplified by a modulator cut through the confusion. "Nobody moves, or everyone dies." The smoke cleared to reveal a phalanx of 20 soldiers clad in high-tech matte black body armor. They weren't pack enforcers. They looked like private military contractors moving with a lethal precision that made the pack guards look like amateurs. Their insignias were a stylized, three-headed dog Cerberus. The room froze. Even the alphas in the room men, used to being the scariest things in the valley, hesitated. These intruders smelled of gunpowder wolfsbane and raw, unchecked dominance. 3 men walked through the parted ranks of the soldiers. The man in the center was a giant. He stood 6'6", his suit tailored to accommodate shoulders that were impossibly broad. He wore sunglasses, but the jawline was unmistakable. He radiated an alpha aura so potent it made the air taste like ozone. This was Cade. To his left walked a man with slicked-back dark hair, wearing a suit that cost more than the entire town of Coldwater Ridge. He held a tablet in one hand and a suppressed pistol in the other. His eyes scanned the room, calculating threats. Roman. To the right was the wild card. He wore no suit, just tactical pants, a tight black t-shirt that strained against his biceps, and a combat knife strapped to his chest. He was grinning, but it was the smile of a predator about to eat. Declan. "Who are you?" Magistrate Cohen demanded, his voice cracking. "This is a sanctioned council proceeding." "You are violating international pack law." Cade ignored him. He walked straight toward the glass execution chamber. The guards standing near the door raised their weapons. Declan moved so fast he was a blur. Before the guard could pull the trigger, Declan had him pinned against the wall, the knife pressed to the guard's jugular. "Drop it," Declan whispered playfully, "unless you want a second smile on that neck." The guard dropped the gun. Cade reached the glass door. It was locked electronically. He didn't ask for a key. He gripped the handle, his muscles bulging, his eyes flashing a brilliant, terrifying violet. With a roar that shook the glass, he ripped the steel door off its frame, shredding the metal lock like it was cardboard. He stepped inside the chamber. Zenia was trembling, the needle still in her arm. She looked up, her vision blurry with tears. She saw the giant man looming over her. She saw the violet eyes. "Cade," she croaked. The terrifying aura vanished instantly. Cade fell to his knees beside the chair. His large hands, which had just torn through steel, were incredibly gentle as he ripped the straps off her wrists. He pulled the IV needle out of her arm and tossed it aside. "I'm here, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here. I'm sorry we're late." He pulled her into his chest. Zenia buried her face in his expensive suit and sobbed. The smell of him, rain, pine, and safety washed over her. Outside the chamber, the courtroom was in chaos. "Arrest them!" Garrick screamed, realizing his victory was slipping away. "They are intruders! Kill them!" "I wouldn't do that," Roman's voice projected across the room. He didn't shout, but he commanded absolute attention. He tapped his tablet, and a massive holographic projection beamed from a device on the floor, lighting up the ceiling of the hall. It was a bank transfer record. "My name is Roman Vance, CEO of Cerberus Corp," Roman announced calmly. "And what you are looking at is a transfer of $5 million from the PAC Treasury to a private offshore account owned by Magistrate Cohen, dated 3 days ago." The crowd gasped. Cohen turned pale. "And this," Roman swiped on the tablet, "is audio recovered from the cloud server of Bax Lowen's phone." A recording played over the speakers. It was Garrick's voice. "You're useless, Bax. You're draining the accounts. You're worth more to me dead. Eat the food, son. Make your father proud for once." The silence in the hall was deafening. Garrick looked like he had seen a ghost. "That's fake," Garrick yelled. "Deep fake technology." "It's authenticated," Roman said coldly. "And we have the autopsy report from our own independent team who intercepted the body at the morgue an hour ago. Bax wasn't poisoned with wolfsbane. He was poisoned with ricin, a human poison. Wolfsbane traces were planted later." Declan stepped forward, still holding his knife. "So here is how this goes. You release our mother. You dissolve this sham of a court. Or we burn this entire building to the ground with all of you inside." "You can't threaten the council," Cohen shrieked. "We have enforcers. Enforcers." Cade stood up, helping Zenia to her feet. He walked her out of the glass chamber, shielding her with his body. He looked at Garrick. "Your enforcers are currently sleeping in the parking lot. My men were very efficient." Cade stared at Garrick. The violet in his eyes swirled. "Hello, Garrick. Remember the stray you kicked out of the diner?" Garrick's knees buckled. You're the boy from the mud." "I am Cade Cerberus now," Cade said. "Alpha of the Obsidian Pack, owner of the largest private defense firm in the hemisphere. And that woman you just tried to execute," Cade pointed to Zenia, who was flanked by Declan and Roman. "That is the Queen Mother of our pack, and you just declared war on her." The dust from the breached doors hung in the air of the great hall, swirling in the beams of the hologram that Roman had projected. The damning image of the bank transfer, $5 million, wired directly to Magistrate Cohen, pulsed with a neon blue glow, casting long, shivering shadows across the faces of the council. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a predator entering a room full of prey, who had forgotten momentarily that they were supposed to be the hunters. Zenia stood by the shattered glass of the execution chamber, her knees trembling not from fear of death, but from the overwhelming proximity of her sons. Cade's hand was still on her shoulder, a heavy, grounding weight. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of old blood. A scent she remembered from the nights he used to come home from the woods with scraped knuckles. But the boy who used to cry over a bruised knee was gone. In his place stood a monolith of a man, vibrating with a controlled, lethal rage. Garrick Lowen, stripped of his mask of the grieving father, looked like a cornered rat. His eyes darted from the armed Cerberus soldiers to the terrified council members, realizing his allies were dissolving into the woodwork. But rats, when cornered, don't surrender. They bite. A low, guttural growl started deep in Garrick's chest. It wasn't human. It was the sound of a wolf that knew it was about to die and decided to take the world with it. "This is a coup!" Garrick roared, his voice cracking as his neck muscles bulged. Spittle flew from his lips. "You bring foreign soldiers into my territory. You threaten a council magistrate in his own hall. You think money and fancy suits make you an alpha." He took a step forward, his fingernails lengthening into claws, scratching against the polished marble floor. He pointed a shaking finger at Cade. "I invoke the right of tooth and claw." The gasps from the gallery sucked the air out of the room. The right of tooth and claw was an ancient, barbaric statute that predated the written laws of the council. It was a relic of the old world. It overrode all modern legal proceedings, all evidence, and all rank. If accepted, the police, the lawyers, and the holograms didn't matter. It was blood for blood. Winner takes the territory. Loser is buried in it. Zenia grabbed Cade's arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of his suit. "No, Cade," she hissed, panic seizing her throat. "He's dirty. He's been fighting for 30 years. He fights to kill. You don't have to do this. We can leave. We can just go." Cade looked down at her. For a split second, the violet fire in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a softness that only she was allowed to see. He reached up and gently removed her hand from his arm, squeezing it reassuringly. "I'm not the boy who ran away from the diner anymore, Mum," he said, his voice low and steady as a heartbeat. "I don't run. Not from him. Not ever again." He turned back to Garrick, his expression hardening into stone. He took off his sunglasses, folding them deliberately, and handing them to Roman. "I accept." The room cleared instantly. The council members, terrified but eager for the spectacle of bloodshed, pressed themselves against the back walls, climbing over benches to get out of the splash zone. The Cerberus soldiers expanded their perimeter weapons, lowered, but fingers hovering over triggers, creating a massive circle in the center of the hall. Garrick didn't wait. He tore off his expensive morning jacket buttons, popping and pinging off the floor. His body began to contort. The sickening sound of bones cracking and reshaping echoed through the hall. His jaw unhinged, his spine elongated, and coarse russet fur erupted from his skin. Within seconds, a massive wolf stood on the marble, foaming at the mouth, eyes burning with a murderous yellow light. He was huge, fueled by decades of alpha dominance and steroid-laced supplements. Cade didn't strip. He didn't loosen his tie. He didn't even take off his jacket. He simply walked forward, his polished dress shoes clicking rhythmically on the stone. "Shift!" someone from the crowd screamed. "Shift or you'll die." Cade ignored them. He stood in the center of the circle, a human man facing a beast twice his size. He looked bored. Garrick lunged. He moved with terrifying speed, a blur of fur and teeth, aiming straight for Cade's exposed throat. Zenia screamed, covering her eyes. But Cade moved with a speed that defied physics. He didn't shift. He didn't dodge. He stepped into the lunge. With a roar of exertion, Cade caught the 1,000-pound wolf in mid-air. He grabbed Garrick by the loose skin of his scruff and the throat, using the wolf's own momentum against him. Cade pivoted his suit jacket, straining against shoulders that were thick with muscle, and slammed the alpha wolf into the marble floor. Crack! The sound was sickening, like a gunshot in a canyon. The marble tiles shattered into dust under the impact. Garrick yelped, a high-pitched, pathetic sound of shock that silenced the room. Cade didn't let go. He dragged the dazed, whimpering wolf across the floor like a rag doll and threw him violently against the heavy oak of the judge's podium. Wood splintered. Garrick scrambled to get up, his form flickering as the pain forced him to revert. He shifted back into a human, naked, bruised, and coughing up blood. "Shift!" Garrick screamed, blood bubbling past his lips. His ego shattered more thoroughly than his ribs. "Fight me like a wolf, coward!" Cade adjusted his cufflink, checking his suit for dust. "You aren't worth my wolf," he said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "You're barely worth my human." Humiliation, hot and blinding, broke Garrick's mind. He screamed a raw, animalistic sound and charged in human form. As he ran, he reached into his boot. "Watch out!" Zenia screamed, seeing the glint of silver. Garrick had pulled a concealed dagger coated in liquid silver, a death sentence for any werewolf. He raised it, aiming for Cade's heart. Cade didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his hands. Thwack! Garrick stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes bulging. A black tactical knife was buried deep in his right hand, pinning it to the wooden podium he had just passed. Garrick howled in agony, dropping the silver dagger as he clutched his impaled hand. Across the room, Declan lowered his arm, casually spinning a second knife between his fingers. He looked disappointed. "Stay out of it, Declan." Cade sighed, not looking back. "I had it. He bored me." Declan shrugged, leaning against a pillar with a lazy grin. "He moves in slow motion. I thought alphas were supposed to be fast." Cade walked up to Garrick, who was now pinned bleeding and sobbing in a heap on the floor. The great alpha of Coldwater Ridge was gone. All that remained was a small, broken man. Cade grabbed a handful of Garrick's hair and yanked his head back, forcing him to look into his violet eyes. "Do you know what we did for 25 years, Garrick?" Cade whispered. The volume was low, but the intensity made the council members shiver. "While you were drinking wine and abusing my mother. While you were playing king in this little mud puddle." Cade leaned closer. "We fought in the subterranean pits of the Iron Guild. We fought things that would make your enforcers wet themselves. We toppled dictators in the East. We built an empire on the broken bodies of men who thought they were strong." He placed his large hand over Garrick's face. He began to squeeze. "Please." Garrick begged, his voice muffled by Cade's palm. "I'll give you the pack. I'll give you the territory. I'll give you everything. Just let me live. The pack is already ours." Roman's voice cut through the tension. Roman stepped forward from the sidelines, tapping his tablet screen. A new projection appeared, a complex web of financial documents. "I just bought your debt, Garrick," Roman announced, his voice devoid of emotion, like an undertaker reading a bill. "The Lowen Pack had outstanding loans with the Northern Bank. I bought the notes an hour ago. I called them in 5 minutes ago. You defaulted." Roman looked up, his green eyes cold and calculating. "The Lowen Pack is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Cerberus Corp. You are bankrupt, Garrick. You own nothing. Not this building. Not your house. Not your car. Not even the shirt on your back, though, seeing as you tore it off. That point is moot." Cade released his grip, letting Garrick's head thump against the floor. He stood up, wiping his hand on a handkerchief he pulled from his pocket, then dropping the cloth onto Garrick's chest like trash. "I'm not going to kill you," Cade said, his voice filled with disgust. "Death is too easy. It's too quick. And frankly, you aren't worth the paperwork." He turned to the terrified magistrate Cohen, who was cowering behind his bench. "Finalize the paperwork," Cade commanded. "Strip him of his rank. He is to be exiled to the Rogue Lands. No pack is to offer him shelter. He will not be allowed to work in pack territories. If he is found on pack lands, he is to be hunted like the stray he treated my mother as. And her," Roman pointed a manicured finger toward the back exit. Lydia, the woman who had smirked while Zenia scrubbed her floors, was trying to sneak out the service door. Two massive Cerberus soldiers stepped in front of her, blocking the light. She froze. She knew, Zenia spoke up. Her voice was trembling, but it gained strength with every word. She walked across the room, past the shattered glass, past the blood on the floor, toward the woman who had tormented her for 2 decades. Lydia fell to her knees, clutching the hem of Zenia's prison jumpsuit. "Zenia, please," he forced me. I had no choice. I was scared of him. "We always have a choice," Zenia said quietly, looking down at the crying woman. I had nothing. I had no money, no pack, no heat. And I chose to save 3 children in a storm, because it was right. You had everything, and you chose to let an innocent woman die to save your reputation. Zenia looked at her sons, the 3 powerful men who surrounded her like a shield wall. She felt a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a lightness she hadn't felt since she was 20. "Let the council deal with her," Zenia said, turning her back on Lydia. "I don't want her blood on my conscience. I just want to go home." Cade stepped forward, offering her his arm. "You don't have a home here anymore, Mom." He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Your home is with us." 3 months had passed since the courtroom doors were blown off their hinges, yet the silence of the Seattle skyline felt louder than any explosion. The private helicopter banked sharply, cutting through the heavy cloud layer, to reveal the glittering expanse of the city below. Zenia Hart pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window. For 25 years, her world had been limited to the muddy perimeter of Coldwater Ridge and the grease-stained walls of a diner. She had been a ghost in her own life, defined by the floorboards she scrubbed and the insults she swallowed. Now she stepped out onto the private helipad of the Obsidian Tower, the wind whipping her silver hair around her face. She wasn't wearing the frayed uniform that smelled of old coffee. She was wrapped in a tailored cream cashmere coat that cost more than the shack she had raised her sons in. Around her neck sat the weight of diamonds, cold, heavy, and undeniable. She walked to the edge of the roof, her heart hammering a rhythm against her ribs that felt suspiciously like hope. "It looks different from up here, doesn't it?" Zenia turned. Standing near the entrance of the roof access were 3 men who looked like they owned the sky itself. Cade stood in the center, a titan in a charcoal suit. He radiated the kind of raw, leashed power that made other alphas cross the street to avoid him. To his left was Roman, checking his watch with precision. He was the architect of their empire, his eyes sharp and calculating, dressed in a suit so sharp it could cut glass. And on the right leaned Declan, the wild one. He had forgone the tie, his collar unbuttoned, to reveal the faint edge of a tattoo, looking restless but content. "I still wake up expecting to see the ceiling of my cell," Zenia admitted, her voice carried away by the wind. She touched the platinum locket Cade had given her earlier that morning. "I spent so long making myself small, making myself invisible. I don't know how to take up space anymore." Cade closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He didn't care about the wind messing up his hair or the soot from the exhaust on his expensive shoes. He wrapped his massive arms around her, pulling her into a chest that felt like a fortress. "You don't have to be small," Cade murmured into her hair. "You never were. You were the giant mom. We were just the ones standing on your shoulders." Roman stepped forward, his usually stoic expression softening. "We made a pact the night we left you in the mud. We swore we wouldn't come back until we were strong enough to burn their world down and build you a new one. We didn't want to return as fugitives. We wanted to return as kings." We almost waited too long, Declan added, his voice cracking slightly. He looked away, staring at the horizon. When we got the intel about the trial, about the execution, I thought we were going to be 5 minutes too late. I've never been that scared in my life. Not in the pits, not in the war. Zenia reached out, taking Declan's rough hand in hers. But you weren't late. You were right on time. She looked at all three of them, her eyes welling up. I thought I had lost you to the world. I thought you would forget the woman who fed you scraps. Forget. Cade pulled back, framing her face with his large hands. Everything we built Cerberus, the tech, the weapons, the money. It was all for you. Every dollar was a brick in the road back to Coldwater. Come on, Roman said, clearing his throat to hide his emotion. There's something downstairs you need to see. The wind is ruining my hair, and we have guests waiting. They led her to the private elevator. As the numbers ticked down, Zenia felt a wave of anxiety. She was used to entering rooms through the service door head bowed. Head up, Cade whispered, sensing her fear. You're the Queen Mother now. The elevator doors slid open to the grand ballroom. The noise hit her first, a wave of applause that sounded like rolling thunder. Hundreds of people, humans and werewolves alike, turned toward her. Champagne glasses were raised. The room was a sea of velvet and silk, but above the stage hung a massive banner in gold and obsidian, the Zenia Heart Foundation. Zenia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What is this? She choked out. It's an orphanage, Roman explained, guiding her onto the mezzanine so she could see the crowd, and a scholarship fund, and a specialized legal defense firm for omegas who have been wrongfully rejected, abused, or framed by corrupt alphas. We bought the old textile mill near the river, Declan said, grinning. You know where you found us. We're tearing it down. We're building a sanctuary there. No pup will ever have to sleep in the mud in Coldwater Ridge again. Not while we're breathing. And the hospital. Cade pointed to a screen, projecting architectural blueprints. The Zenia Heart Wing. Free healthcare for unranked wolves. Because you saved our lives with nothing but a first aid kit and a lot of love. Imagine what you can do with $1 billion. Tears streamed down Zenia's face, hot and fast. For 25 years she had been told she was worthless. She had been spat on, ignored and discarded. And now she was looking at a legacy that would save thousands. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a savior. As she walked down the grand staircase, the crowd parted. Alpha's men who would have ordered her to clean their boots a month ago bowed their heads in genuine respect. They didn't bow to her money. They bowed to the woman who had tamed 3 monsters and raised them to be men. Hours later, long after the champagne had run dry and the guests had departed, the 4 of them sat on the private balcony of the penthouse. The tuxedos were discarded ties, loosened heels kicked off. In the center of the glass table sat a greasy paper bag filled with cheeseburgers and fries. To the old days, Declan toasted with a milkshake, clinking it against Zenia's soda. Zenia took a bite of the burger, closing her eyes. It tasted better than the filet mignon served at the gala. It tasted like family. So, she asked, wiping a smudge of ketchup from her lip, I never asked. What actually happened to Garrick? The mood shifted slightly. Cade took a slow sip of his beer, a dark satisfaction settling in his violet eyes. I kept my word, Cade said calmly. I didn't kill him. Roman bought the debt of every property he owned, Cade continued. He's blacklisted from every pack in the hemisphere. Last I heard, he's working as a dishwasher at a truck stop diner off the highway in Nevada. The owner says he slow breaks a lot of plates and complains about his knees. Zenia paused. She thought of Garrick, the arrogance, the cruelty, the way he had looked at her when he ordered her execution. She tried to find pity in her heart, but found only a quiet, settling peace. "He's living my life," she whispered, "the life he forced me to live." "Karma isn't a wolf," Roman said, picking up a fry. "It's a mirror." "No," Cade corrected him, leaning back and looking at his mother and brothers. The city lights reflected in his eyes, but the coldness of the Alpha was gone, replaced by the warmth of a son who had finally come home. "It's not karma, it's family." The rejected Omega of Coldwater Ridge looked at her three sons, the warrior, the architect, and the protector. She realized she hadn't just saved them that rainy night 25 years ago. By giving them a life, she had ensured they would one day return to save hers. And that is the incredible story of Zenia Hart and the three sons who returned from the shadows to save her. It's a reminder that true power isn't about your rank, your money, or your bloodline. True power is the love of a family that refuses to leave anyone behind. Garrick Lowen thought he could crush an Omega, but he forgot the most important rule of the wild: you never ever mess with a mother protecting her pups. If this story gave you chills, or if you cheered when Cade broke down that courtroom door, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a twist. And let me know in the comments. Do you think Garrick's punishment was enough, or did he deserve worse? I'll be reading your replies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.